Yeah, okay. So, okay. So what I was struck by, hang on a sec. Here it is. Okay. All right. When I looked at this Porshaki, say, what I was struck by particularly was the general way in which so much of it discusses is about boundaries. What we can mix together, what we can't mix together. You know, everything from the ox and the bull, I guess it is, and the wool and the linen. And you can't marry this person, you can marry this person, all of those different boundaries in different spheres. And then Abigail did this talk yesterday on self and not self and the immune system, which was also about a different way of boundaries. And really went to where I was thinking, as did Meg's talk earlier this week on the face of God. Because the questions I've been wrestling with now for some time for myself have to do with, you know, what do I mean by me, by self, myself, and what am I talking about as somehow that me is the face of God, okay? So this is much too long a teaching, and I'll probably get to half of it, okay, if that, because I'm hoping we can also talk a bit. Anyway, so I'm also, this is such a connected to all of you. Well, I guess Roberta isn't here today, but I'm beginning with something that I experienced. Let me just change this because I've got me. I'm looking at me. I don't want to look at me. Yeah, that's better. That Roberta did in a workshop I attended long ago on nonviolent communication, and it stayed with me. It was a very powerful teaching. In that case, we were in person. So what we did was she would ask us, it was like a kind of game in regard to who is me. So she would give a description, and these are the more external descriptions, but that's where I'm starting particularly. And we stood up and we walked to where whoever, the yeses were over here and the no's were over here, but we're going to do it just by raising hands, okay? So these are some of the questions about, you know, this is how I describe me, or you describe you, or don't. So I am human. Okay, we're all together on that one. You really do need to raise your hand for this one, if you can. Okay. I am a woman, at least genetically, okay? We all say yes, okay. I am less than 70 years old. Notice, 2, 3, 2, I think, okay? We've had a division here, right? I have never given birth. I live alone. Notice just switching with different people. There's one we can't, well, let me take this now. I have been widowed. I have been really poor at some time in my life. And as we do this, I'm going to have a few more. Notice how you feel. You know, notice how it feels if you're in a minority, if you're the only one, or as you join with different people, that there feels like more of a connection with that person in that second of doing it, right? Abigail, when you raised your hand to I am widowed, it was like, oh, hi, Abigail, you know, as I raised my hand. I have lived outside the United States. Different group. I've had at least one serious illness. I have had a close friend who was a person of color. Again. Okay. So the first point is to notice how we belong to different groups, depending on which aspect of our identity is being called on, okay? So we have lots of different ways of saying me here, depending on the question. And the second point again, and I know I've been repeating myself, is that the different me people, as we have the different descriptions of me fits with different other people. And the reason I went to here first, and also because this is what Roberta was doing, this was on nonviolent communication, her workshop, is that in this era in which we are so, the definitions of who am I, has become so solidified, particularly around political beliefs, as if that's the only thing that counts. But also increasingly around issues, we're so separated still to a fair extent by color, by race and color, but also by income level, by education level. We are largely a congregation that is definitely educated, and people who are not well educated do not fit as well. They don't feel, they don't get welcomed as much in a general way because they're seen as less like me. I mean, I think that's real. So I just wanted to start with that, the fluidity and the possibilities of expanding one's awareness of who am I by pulling out of who am I and how I can be like this other person, how I can be with this other person, because we have this in common. I was thinking particularly, it was very powerful for me. We had, there was a while in the last 2 years, and it ended this year, where there was someone that a number of us had somehow gotten to know who was doing house repairs, all kinds of handyman work, and he was incredibly good at it. He also was Republican. He also was a marathon runner. He also was one of the sweetest, nicest people I have ever met, okay, just in general. And everybody that I knew among my friends, all of whom were rabid Democratic voters, just figured we're not going to talk about that with Wes. And then he was run over by a car while visiting his grandkids in, I think, South Carolina, and he died a few months ago. And we've all felt such grief because we were allowed ourselves to connect with him in all the other ways and see him so fully. And it was such a lesson, okay? And related to this, okay, so this is, I'm then going on. There's also the Buddhist prayer of thanks as you have a meal, which many of us may have tried at different times or done, which is also such a powerful way of changing the sense, not so much of me, but of connecting to all the other me's out there, however they are categorizing themselves or are categorized by me, by the me who does the categorizing. Judgmental Gail, okay? Judging Gail. And that's the one that says, and I thank you for this bread, and I thank the person who baked it, and all the people in the bakery who worked with that person, and the person who trucked it to the store, and the person who put it on the shelf, and the person who made the truck, and the person who grew the grain, and the person who made the yeast, and you go on and on. And ultimately, you have the world basically in that piece of bread. And it's a profound experience if one really does this again and again and again, of how it really is all one. It's all a manifest. And then comes the next step, if you believe this, it's all a manifestation of the divine. And it's not that it's connected, it's interwoven. There's nothing but this web, this matrix of connection. By the way, I think I brought this up, I'm not sure, this is like another, I'm just talking off the top of my head now. I asked Alfred, because he remembered, he had actually worked with a guy who did the 6 degrees of separation original study, this one, right? Right. And it turned out, he swore that it was not just when it was replicated, it wasn't just the US, it was worldwide. It only took 6 people at maximum, and most of the time it was less, to get a letter from the people he had in his program, he had involved doing this, who were mainly graduate students, to somebody else anywhere in the world delivered, which is astonishing. It blows me away every time I think about it. I can't believe it takes 6 people to get to some letter in India, okay, or even some letter in in Illinois or Kansas or whatever. Okay, So
Yeah.
the other teaching, if there's time, I have no idea where we are. I can stop. That's about time to stop probably. The other teaching has to do with the internal me. And I'll just say quickly that, you know, when I pay attention to what's internal, I also experience a multiplicity of selves. I mean, there's the vantage, and this is also the vantage point which I have for therapy. And this is the meditation experience when one does mindfulness work. You know, there's the wounded child, okay, which is what most of the therapy tries to get to heal that child. And that wounded child also has different faces. There's one that has homicidal rage, near homicidal, and terror, and just blank withdrawal. You know, there is the workaholic with the endless to-do list. She has another name. There's the judgmental critic of self, of others. We all have these. This isn't just me. We've all got these different selves. This is part of it means to be human. So when we talk about, and the work of healing, particularly, and I really wanted to say this, because I hear this, the work of healing and the spiritual work, which is also the work of healing, doesn't matter how you're doing it, you know, doesn't matter what the mode is that you're working in, is to, as much as possible, reduce the power and the presence of the selves, all of these selves that have stories connected to them that are either coping strategies to keep us from feeling scared all the time or anxious. That's workaholism, is no question about that. It's like any other addiction, it reduces anxiety. Okay. And it has some good points. I'm not saying it's all bad, but to not be caught up any longer in thinking of ourselves as this unitary being with stories attached. And the more we let go of those stories, those endless, this is why I am who I am, this is who I am, this is how I came to be, this is what matters about me, all of that, the more we let go of that so that we are utterly in the moment, simply present to what is happening in this moment without all those stories in our heads, the more we experience whatever we're talking about by divine presence. And while it is true that we may have the experience, and certainly our liturgy says, that we are loved as we are also asked throughout our teaching to be more than that person and to become more and more simply, ultimately present to what is, because that's what God sees, what is, to see the manifestations of what is, not what we think about them, not the stories we have that say it's this way, it's that way, but what is. And then we are more and more, I think, truly, and this is a question, I mean, I've been struggling with this. On one hand, everything is precious as it is and to be cherished. On the other hand, as human beings, when we say we are in the image of God, we are most, I believe, in the image of God when we are the freest from all of those littler me's, the little selves, and somehow are in this state of expansiveness where there's, I don't even want to say it, I see Abigail nodding, there's less and less sense of somehow meanness. And it's not self-centered, it's seeing this whole being, somehow experiencing this whole matrix in which we are simply one more little piece of it, no more important, in fact, than the squirrel that's out there outside my window right now. Everything counts, everything equally, when you see it that way. So that's it, I'm done for now. I've really been struggling with this. This is a major question right now for me. What do I mean when I say God's, you know, I mirror God's face, you know, or all of that.
Shamati.
Who would like to blow shofar today?
I'm sorry?
Joan? Shofar.
Oh, I can't. Go ahead. Is anybody else doing it?
Shall we stand?
Let's blow it.
Whoa.
Karen, of course you're doing it. Sorry. I hear